Hi, everybody. It's Heidi from Costumeco, and we're back again with the Dragon Demands. And right now, we're going to start talking. In the last segment, we were talking a little bit about the Wikia page, Game of Thrones, but now we're going to get into these sort of rumors. I don't know if they're rumors about the prequels. Do you want to explain that?
Yes. Now, starting last year, they said that 5 different prequels were pitched for Game of Thrones, and whatever the 5th one was, it got shelved, which Cogman might have been doing. And I'm pretty sure his is the one that was shelved because he left to sign some exclusive deal with Amazon, so that was probably his. So there were 4 competing prequel pitches, and there isn't just one pitch, Long Night prequel about the Age of Heroes. That's the one HBO really likes. And if you're even casual news like winterscoming.net, Nerdist have pointed out, there's a discrepancy between how HBO describes it. They go, we're making the prequel. Martin will passive-aggressively respond. Well, legally his hands are tied. He'll make a blog post politely saying, the other prequels are still being considered. Mm-hmm. Why does HBO need to hype it now? The whole point is you start hyping once you're sure. What happens if Long Night isn't good and you wasted all this hype on what was actually not a good project? So there are currently 4 ideas by 4 different showrunners. Long Night is being run by Jane Golden. And as for the other 3, they didn't tell us the identities of them, and we can probably suss out that 2 other ones, which I think are... There's 2 other writers, Carly Ray and Brian Helgeland, who I'm pretty sure that they're doing Dance of the Dragons and Targaryen Conquest. We're almost sure. I explained this on the Wiki's prequel page because
I read
Martin said Fire and Blood is the basis for 2 other prequels. So that's what they're doing. What happened was I made a major leak about the other frontrunner prequel, which HBO said nothing about and refuses to acknowledge it exists. That they're playing silent on this. The one by Max Borenstein, who's the guy making the new Godzilla franchise. Mm-hmm. And he's a great guy. And I really like his work. With all the work he put into Godzilla, that no, let's treat this as a serious drama like the original Godzilla, where it's a metaphor for nature destroying us with hurricanes and nuclear power and stuff. It was a really good update to Godzilla. And his prequel is on the Doom of Valyria, or rather the events leading up to the Doom of Valyria. So, how much have you heard of this, about these 2 rival shows?
There's one. Okay, the one that I heard, like, because I haven't been following it too much, compared to it. But there's the one with Naomi Watts. That's the main. Is that the one that you're talking about? The one they're
actually casting, the Long Night one. Yes.
Yeah, that's the one that HBO has been sort of, and then they've got this young cast. Like there's this one guy who's actually in Rain, Tony Regbo. I know. Tony Regbo. He's in Rain. Someone said, is he in Rome as well? What else is he in? He's in something else.
I just today put out a video on this 6-month catch-up on all casting news for the past 6 months on this versus casting sheets. Like a lot of roles still haven't been filled.
Sure.
But like the casting roles never said Caucasian female 50 years old, which is how you would describe Naomi Watts, but probably because she was handpicked without an audition. That's normal. Mm-hmm. So what happened was, this is all Martin. Other people reporting leak point out, Martin keeps saying there are other prequels that we're still working on.
Okay.
And HBO keeps acting like, no, this is the prequel because it's the one HBO likes. And consider that HBO are the people who were hyping up Game of Thrones seasons 5 through 7 when we had TV Dorn and all the other stuff. That this is appealing to. I don't think it's books versus TV series. It's attentive fans versus shallow, I'm watching this for Amelia Clark's Instagram people who don't really pay attention to lore on the level you do. It's attentive versus casual. That's with any TV show. Like the final seasons of a lot of shows that turned sour, like Lost or something, had raving fans who were just, you're not paying attention, this doesn't make sense anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the point is,
or The Walking Dead.
Yeah,
I kind of bailed on that show.
Yeah, but the point is, Martin didn't write anything for The Long Night. It's 8,000 years ago. He has prequel novellas for different eras, like his book Fire and Blood is outlines written like a fake history book for the Targaryen Conquest or the Dance of the Dragons. And no one thought you would never do Long Night. It's 12,000, starts 12,000 years. It's about 8,000 years ago. nothing from current Westeros is then. The Wall doesn't exist. King's Landing doesn't exist. And it's not even, well, it's different. It's primeval forest. And everyone was going, and on top of that, specifically a rehash of the White Walker storyline.
Yeah.
And it really felt, I'm just saying what everyone is feeling. It feels like HBO wants to cash in on the buzz from the White Walker War in the final season of Game of Thrones, which is, getting stellar ratings. When, if you actually sit down and think of what storylines could they tell with this, it's at the best limited because there's no source material to draw from. There is literally a paragraph that everything you saw in the TV show about the Long Night, like old man telling Bran the childhood story about it, that's all we know, that the White Walkers came and they killed everyone. And that in and of itself won't make it a bad show. It's just, this isn't based on anything. There isn't any, or even, well, not a narrative. There isn't world building. We don't know what the world was like during 8,000 years ago. That's like the difference between us and, like, mythologically Noah's Ark or something. Martin has said it's like the difference between us and Noah's Ark. I don't really know that
it's almost like a civilization.
Yeah. So I'm not the only one saying this. If this wasn't really a good idea, people are saying this is a kind of controversial idea and it feels like a shallow choice. So I won't say exactly how, other than that I was mailing around every single production office to multiple staff members, to all three other people. Hey, Long Night doesn't sound like a great idea. Would you like to do some no spoilers Q&A about what your project is, just to remind the public? And I thought, we would do some fluff Q&A with the wiki to show, yes, the other prequel projects aren't dead, even though HBO is hyping theirs. And I sent this out a dozen to each, and I kept mailing and mailing. And eventually, someone from the Max Borenstein project mailed me back and said, would you like to do a Skype Q&A? And I said, okay, that we can answer you some basic questions about the production from what we know of it. And
so were you, like, shocked that happened?
As I was on the phone, they said, so, you want to see the series Bible? We trust you because you said Long Night wasn't that great and we're laying out this isn't a... Well, here's what they told me happened, which, again, this is a biased source. Empire of Ash, the Doom of Valyria prequel, was the first prequel, and it seems like Long Night usurped it, that it's like how they came up with the Tarleys or Dorne at the last minute for costumes. This was one of the last prequel pitches that was made. And it shows that, like, if you actually, were you telling me you sat down for 2 years and were writing this? Because sitting down for a day and thinking on it, fans are, there's not much to talk about with The Long Night. That it feels like attentive fans versus unattentive book versus TV. It's not just books versus TV series, but they were sitting down since 2016 writing a series Bible that looks like a second volume of The World of Ice and Fire. And if you and other people haven't read that, that's the big world source book that Martin put out in 2014.
Yeah,
and it's like
that's with Linda and Elio.
And the way they were able to leak this to me is they said, well, they had a limited print run. There's 100 copies of it, and there's enough copies out now that someone got their hands on one and was able to show it to me. And there's two series Bibles. They already have a season 1 outline. There's the script Bible for season 1. It's standard practice with TV shows to have a season map. It's not dialogue, but it's the season outline, seen on a scene-by-scene level for 10 episodes in season 1. That exists already. Like, they're not, like, they are on pause. They've been ready to go for a long time.
Sorry, is this for Empire of Ash? Or is this
for Empire of Ash?
Yes, okay.
Started in 2016. According to them, I'm just going to use they and them, by the way.
Yeah, no problem.
This was the first prequel and the one Martin was really excited about. Well, he was excited about Targaryen Cognizant Dance, too, but this and Long Night were always the two front-runner shows. That's not to say they're not going to do Conquest and Dance of the Dragons, just that, like, we heard about Rogue One like 5 years ago for Star Wars. It's just, they'll do that eventually, but they don't even have full writing staffs for those. They're just like a prequel script, a pilot script, which is fine. It's just, they're not near production. Empire of Ash is ready to go and on standby. That it was always these two.
And to your knowledge, is George attached to this project?
He's not not on a day-to-day level, but they had...
He'd be a producer
about half of... but he's a technically producer. He said they had about half... It says in the series Bible, they had about half a dozen big sit-down meetings with him where he shared all his unpublished notes on Valyria, because Valyria got destroyed only 400 years ago. The Targaryens are from it. They know... He knows a fair amount about it. He just never wrote it down. That if you read the World Book, it doesn't have specific chapter on Valyria so much as in general terms what it was like. And she had all these unpublished notes and new ideas. The way the series Bible is structured is citing things he said. They're not proud when it's an idea they came up with. That they're like, people who go, this is only, people came to see Martin's ideas, not ours. Whereas Long Night, there was that interview a couple of weeks ago where he was saying, well, they showed me some ideas and I kind of gave them some advice, which is what he said about season 5.
Oh, gosh.
It sounded like he was trying to distance himself, but not my words. Other people went, this sounds like he's distancing himself from this. So, the point is, it's annoying that, Empire Bash started earlier, was working out series Bibles. Does Long Night even have a series Bible on this scale? And it's the prequel I would have made, where it's framed in such a way that it's referring to the books, but extending beyond them. That, well, we heard about this, so let's, building on that, this is what this was like. And I want to give you a brief overview of it.
Sure.
Okay, so this is all spoiler info.
Yeah, and so I just want to say, you have a lot of this in your videos. Like, you have one, like, sort of some...
So I came onto your channel as a cross-promotion that I spent the last few months, this happened last July, making 8 hours worth of videos explaining this. How was I able to do this? Well, apart from the fact I know the books very well, I'm a medievalist, and I minored in Roman Civ, and I know Latin, so... When they were trying to explain to me, well, you see, like Rome, there's these factions. I went, there's Sulla and Marius. And they went, I cut them off and said, you know who that is? You know Roman history? And I whipped my Latin book off of my shelf because it was a video chat that they're like, oh no, you know all sorts of Rome stuff already. So they were starting to give me the series Bible explains it to anyone who doesn't know anything about Rome off the top of their head. I already did. So the videos are me going, this is what Rome was like. They were using these terms. I'll explain that in a minute.
And you were asking me if I'd seen the series Rome. So in Rome, in the series Rome, they show the factions then?
Sort of. I'm talking to your viewers who have seen Rome. After the Roman Empire,
watch it.
Now Martin the costumes are great. Martin has for years said, Valyria is my world's version of the Roman Republic with dragons. And so, like, Daenerys and the Targaryens are the last surviving Valyrian dragon lords that they escaped. And there was, like Mount Vesuvius blowing up, there was this massive volcanic eruption 400 years ago called the Doom of Valyria that destroyed the entire city in a single day. Because all the dragons nested around the local volcanoes, all the dragons died except for the Targaryen ones. And their whole empire fell apart. And, Essos turned into civil war. In the chaos, the Dothraki began their great expansion. The free cities tore themselves apart in civil wars. And they referred to it by name a few times in the TV series, like the season 4 premiere when Jaime gets the new his new sword Oathbreaker. He goes, no one's made a new Valyrian steel sword since the Doom of Valyria. Like, they've mentioned this a few times in the show.
Yeah, it's like backstory.
And when they go into, that's a little condensed. It was a condensation I would have made in season 5 when Tyrion and Jorah are sailing through the ruins. It's just this overgrown, blasted ruin, and nothing's there anymore. And they said this used to be, but you see these mega structures in ruin. That it was it's like Atlantis. It was the greatest civilization ever, and now it's gone.
And then at that time, I think I was watching your video. So the Targaryens were a lesser house at that time.
Well, it's all relative. That they said there's 40 major families who rule this empire that controls half the world. And on a certain level, if you're in the top 40 billionaires of the world, that's saying something. Martin has said that the way the Long Night prequel is phrased, they go, it's not the story you think you knew. We're going, you're going to make stuff up, right? Versus, we already knew from the book. Martin said the Targaryens were actually not a very important family compared to other dragon lords. They were not near the top of these 40 families.
Yeah.
So you will see that they're relatively not that important, but we knew that. That's not inventing anything. It'll be shocking to see them that this is the rise of the Targaryens, but that's all stuff we knew going in. So knowing that,
just on a costume level, like, so some people, I've had some people say to me, I mean, depending on what prequel they're doing, we're not sure yet, that they'd love to see Clapton come in. And I kind of have a different feeling about it. Like, what's your sort of thought about having the same design?
I'd kind of be interested in doing what she did in season 7, where she'd come in to do a guest design or two. But bring in new blood, have her I wouldn't mind if she submitted some ideas.
Sure.
I think they're going for, given that it's a different time period, I think they should do something else. But hey, a good idea is a good idea, and if she submits one for fun, I'd be happy to have her do something. Mm-hmm. But
because it's going to be a whole new world. It's going to be a whole different world.
Yeah, no, sorry, it's just you haven't read the book, so this will be a little harder to explain.
Sure.
Because the show cut out so much about your own videos. It's hard to describe Essos costumes versus the books, where we know there are mini fandoms for each of the 9 free cities, because they're all really interesting. But they're all their own unique cultures. They're entirely different from each other. And the Valyrian Freehold covered everything from Pentos to Marine. Think about how long it took characters to travel between there. That was all in their empire. Mm-hmm. And that they all speak Valyrian, because that High Valyrian was their version of Latin. And after the empire fell, mutated into their version of Italian or French or whatever. So they kept saying before this leak came out, one of the prequels isn't set in Westeros. This was the not Westeros one, where no, this is about Valyria, and it's not, oh no, this big explosion. You realize the explosion will happen at the end of the show. Mm-hmm. But it starts with, just as we build up to the Long Night, it starts with this round of civil wars tearing Valyria apart that will lead to whatever caused that. But the hardcore, gritty, realistic political and economic scheming subplots like the War of the Five Kings, that's what's going to be season 1 in the early stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's going to run 5 years, 7 if they're lucky. They're trying for 7. It's supposed to be a flagship show. So.
Yeah. Now, one question I had for you, so you just so everyone knows, you did a post on Wikia about this.
I made a special report leaking it to the world.
And then it got picked up by some other, news outlets, right?
Some news sites, by which I mean print magazines.
Watches on the wall, or?
They picked up, I'm saying full sentences, I tried submitting it to bigger print magazines, and they politely told me HBO would be mad at them for leaking something.
Okay.
So it didn't leak as much as I should like. But, the major fan sites like winteriscoming.net picked it up.
Winter is Coming, that's where I saw it.
Westeros.org also politely told me, out of respect for George, we will not run something that was leaked without permission. Even though I think this is the prequel he wants, but, legally his hands are tied. So I don't blame them for not running it. It's just, we don't want to be yelled at by HBO. So,
sure.
But Business Insider ran it, a couple of mainstream sites, but it's making the rounds. Yeah. So, point is, I should have rehearsed this more.
That was very exciting for you, though. That was just pretty exciting.
And just the synergy of, yes, I know Roman history, I know what you're talking about, and just going back and forth. I was taking handwritten notes throughout the whole thing of, well, this is what Valyria was like, and that this matches the book so well that you clear a lot of the broad strokes come from Martin. So I tell you, the factions and stuff, that's him. They didn't come up with that. They came up with dialogue, obviously, but this isn't, he okayed it. He's saying, well, it's like, we didn't know anything about Valyria. We know who they conquered and stuff, but, well, what was it like internally? What led to their fall? And he explained, well, it's sort of like Rome in a fantasy setting. Mm-hmm. So I'm interested because
obviously dragons.
Yeah. So I'm interested in talking to you because I want to reach the costuming community of, costuming, I don't know how to make it, but a big part of world building and, character design is what they look like, what their costumes are. So I'm trying to encourage it. The thesis here is encouraging you guys to brainstorm cool character art, like for Tumblr and everything else, of just these new factions. We never even knew their names before, from the books. This is new to us. But it kind of fits. It's this amazing, it'll bring everyone together because it's simultaneously new to book fans, but in general terms, stuff we knew, so it feels like it's not made up.
Yes.
Because the World of Ice and Fire source book was saying, well, this is what Volantis is like. This is what Pentos is like. They kept world-building details, even though the narrative from episode to next will be a surprise.
Or Yeti, even, Yeti.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, Empire Vash all around seems like a better idea to me, and I'll explain that later, but like they have all these things in I'll explain right now. They have these mission statements in their thing saying this is going to be focused on diversity, respectful diversity, not tokenism. So like core cast members will be gay, will be female political leaders, will be black. They said half the cast isn't white, half the writers aren't white. And it'll be like the antidote to TV Dorn, basically. If everything that went wrong, it feels like these people, it was written in 2016. I don't know how much they were reacting to that, but it feels like people who gave up, I gave up at a certain point. It made me hope again that there's good in the world, that people who work hard at things, and we are capable of this as a fandom, and we can rebuild from everything we've lost with this. And I'm really not hearing anything about Long Night other than, well, you know, we're the prequel, and there are 3 other ideas, one of which is very close to production. If someone told me I would rather have the Dance of the Dragons from Fire and Blood, I'm all for it. I love Rhaenyra. I love those prequel stories. It's that, why are we going with the one that has absolutely no basis in anything? So, the point is, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. I'm not trying to, they go, oh, don't contrast the two. When you hear about all of them, tell me that again, of just the one that was, you know, not tortoise in the hare. What's the Aesop about the grasshopper and the other guy? Just, there was the responsible prequel, and there was the one that was, this is cashing in on buzz about the White Walkers. I digress. So this is new to book fans too, for world building purposes. I'm looking forward to your concept art of costumes and stuff.
Now,
what was Valyria like?
Do you think that part, like regarding this diverse cast and diverse characters, do you think that's sort of like in response to some people feeling that Game of Thrones is very like whitewashed, or
the books aren't like that?
But yeah, that's what George just said. I mean, there was a really great interview with him a couple of weeks ago. Did you see it where someone was asking him about where they were shooting in Croatia or something? Oh no.
Yeah, I saw the clip.
It was regarding the slaves, right? And all the slaves. He's like, well, they're Croatian, so they hired Croatian background players, so that's what they look like, No,
they were filming in Morocco.
Morocco. Sorry, that's what it was.
But then the script, we get all these crazy reports from the script that, like, when we actually saw the scripts for season 4, like Martin, the Sansa rape isn't in the books.
Yeah.
And then their response is, well, once we chose to marry her off to a rapist, what choice did we have? And that's one thing. You merged her with the storyline of this other character. And it's not out of respect.
It wasn't even Sansa that happened to, apparently.
Yeah, it isn't. And it's this other unrelated character. And turns out they were setting up Sansa's Vale storyline as late as season 4.
Okay.
And the other character, so like in Martin's script, and this is all over the news, that he was setting up the fake Arya plot, where really Ramsay marries a girl passed off as Arya, who's really a servant. And when Clapton designed the Dark Sansa, Jane Poole, when Clapton designed that Dark Sansa power outfit in season 4, I seriously think, based on this timeline, that she was intending it to be worn by her when she's reigning over the Vale Lords and reigning them, like in the sample chapters in the next book. And she never mentally thought, this is what she's wearing when she's in Winterfell married to Ramsay Bolton, the serial rapist from the books. So you just, how late in production that change was. So
yeah, it doesn't make sense.
But I'm drifting here. That in the books there are a lot more non-white characters in the Free Cities, and a lot more prominent characters in Slaver's Bay. That in the script for that scene where she's crowd surfing, turns out it says she's crowd surfing on all the black slaves, a white speck in a sea of black or something, and you knew the cast was black when you kept telling Martin, it's just casting. I don't know what happened. We don't know, but it's weird. And by season 4, they were making an emphasis on show some of the slaves are white. This is like Roman slavery, or it's race blind.
Yeah.
But regardless of the slavery stuff, it's the way you handle Dorne, and that there are prominent Dornish POV characters who, like Arya and Martell, who they're not important, let's cut them. And you do realize you just cut out most of the black characters in your cast.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but this is, a lot of the cast isn't white, and nor are they, we're these perfect non-white. Everyone is morally gray. just like Game of Thrones, it's just let's have better written women and non-white people and gay people as opposed to like Loras getting marginalized. And just they kept saying this isn't tokenism. We recognize tokenism isn't real. And I just really felt this is written by people who will get it right and get the spirit of Martin and respect him.
Well,
and it's what we deserve.
Well, regarding Game of Thrones, I think part of the reasons why some people, I haven't been as angry. I know you didn't like one of my friends. She made like a doll with Sansa's wedding gown, and you thought that was awful, but.
Well, the gown itself, out of context from any TV show, I assume was fine stitching, but
but the meaning behind it, So, like for instance, we had that gown on my top 20 best Game of Thrones costumes.
Oh no, don't get me. Clapton gave that her all.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
but I don't think she wanted to do it.
Yeah, and then there was all this. That they had to stitch the back with some like cotton.
So it would rip off easier.
So
and just
rip off, yeah. And I mean that's pretty. But anyways, and I think what a lot of, I've given them a lot of leeway story wise, just because I'm trying to serve the costumes. But I think one of the things for me was part of the reason why it's the way it is that we have all these male voices and we don't have really that many female voices. I mean, we have.
I yell about that in my long night video I just posted today of people making the backhanded compliments that, wow, Long Night has a female director and a female writer, and well, Carly Rae's a woman too, but they can't bring themselves to say there hasn't been a female writer since season 3.
Yeah.
And there isn't a writer's room. Benioff micromanages everything. And this is one of the longest stretches a show has gone without a female writer or director. And even just other voices, like a staff. Even Jane Goldman has a staff of like half a dozen writers, so does Empire Bash. That this is all dependent on this one person. And I don't know. I have suspicions of why does he do these things. A lot of people make theories about why Benioff did all this. He's trying too hard. That it's got to be awesome. It's got to be cool. And sometimes it's at whim of. And he said this of like Dorne is bad because I like that actor. That he really doesn't know what he's doing. But I'm getting off track here of just the failures of the past of. New thing of have a staff of multiple writers who check each other's work so Dorne doesn't happen again. That just. One of my videos on Empire Bash was saying, I hope that they like True Blood, True Blood's HBO, and I was joking at one of the other administrators who's a woman who liked True Blood for this.
But the last
I promise you, we're going to have a lot of hardcore gay sex scenes, and this will win the women back to the show. We'll get back the True Blood crowd. I was talking specifically to another person who's an admin who's into that. All the yaoi stuff. It's like, they know we need to put in some male eye candy to get the ladies back so this fandom isn't a sausage fest.
Yeah.
We got to bring people back and not just have all this crassness. And
well, like, the thing that's interesting though is like, say, a show like True Blood is written by Charlene Harris. She's like this middle-aged, Southern white lady, right? And she probably gets off on, writing some of this.
Well, I can only conjecture.
Yeah. So like I watched it with my husband. We really enjoyed it. It got kind of goofy, like, towards. But I read all the books and so it's got a very different tone to it, right? Same with Outlander. It's written by a woman.
8 hours of videos and other ones, like the ones on the female POV characters for Empire Bash, and saying these are real female politicians ruling over the board. And like Sansa talking in a stern voice is not her being powerful. When so many people are going, she didn't do anything to defeat Littlefinger or Ramsay for that matter. They go, well, it's powerful. You're reacting to the actor talking in a stern voice. This isn't narrative agency.
Yeah.
That I really felt the characters they described. So I've been rambling for a while. I didn't intend to. Let's give a pause here, and I want to describe what the world of Valyria was like from Leak.
Sure.
So, and this is a little difficult because I should be telling someone who doesn't know, so all your audience will know, because I don't want this to just be exclusive. No, we're book readers. We should know. I want everyone to like this good story. So, if you don't know Roman history and you don't know the Valyria, all we knew about Valyria was they're like Rome with dragons. And the actual factions in it pretty much match up to what Rome was like. For those of you who watched HBO's Rome, basically, after Rome conquered the known world, they're rich, they conquered the Greeks, they conquered Macedonians, they conquered Carthage. after centuries of peace, power and wealth, when you're the only superpower, power, wealth, and influence in a republic, in this democracy, starts getting really concentrated into an elite class in the Senate, right?
I hear you.
So, like Star Wars is based on the fall of Rome, okay? It's in space. What's that line from Phantom Menace? You've done Star Wars videos of
Yes.
There's no interest in the common good anymore. The Republic has become bloated with decay, corruption, and graft, and the Senate is only out for self, bickering politicians. It doesn't matter which faction wins. They're just lining their own pockets. So in Rome, you had
two big factions. They were called the Optimates and the Populares. That's the best and the popular, which don't confuse that. They're not the popular front. They're both aristocrats.
Okay, sure.
So for those of you who watched HBO's Rome, that was actually the second generation of this class conflict that was happening. That Caesar, who was not in the Senate, well, his family was of Senate rank, but the old hardcore stuffy aristocrats who were like Cassius and Brutus versus Caesar and Mark Antony. Caesar and Mark Antony were the Populares, the Optimates were Cassius and Brutus. This is a gross oversimplification, but I'm moving along. But that was the second generation of that fight. That was in the 40s, 50s BC. Generation before that is when the Civil War started in the 80s BC. That just wealth was getting power, getting concentrated. It wasn't really a democracy
anymore, and there were two rival factions in the Senate. And as with any democracy in decline, you have to have at least two parties. You have the party in power and the one that happens to be out of power who wants to get into power. And they're going, oh, the party in power is corrupt. They don't want to reform. They want to be the corrupt party in power.
Yeah, sounds like Canada.
Right. Yeah, where the corrupt party in power wants to stay in power. With every democracy, you see this throughout world history in different contexts, but Rome is just a major example, that eventually you had in any time you have an empire that starts conquering other places, you have a split between the people who were powerful when we started, the original kings, or the original aristocrats, and everyone who got wealth and plunder in the waves of conquest. The younger aristocracy who got up-jumped into a higher status from, they were warlords, originally in the military, and then they gained wealth and status from that. New men. That actually comes from, we say that in different contexts, but it starts with the problems in Rome, that we said there's this wave of new men, in Latin novus homo, who rose to Senate rank. So there was a split between the aristocracy, between the old upper aristocracy of the generational, I allegedly go back to the fall of Troy, and these new men who were the younger families of aristocrats. They were fighting for a couple of generations, though, and you had this split, and it was just the younger families wanted power and the older families had it. The leader of the side in round one of the Optimates, as the upper aristocracy, was a man named Sulla. And the younger aristocracy's general was Marius. They fought it out. Marius took Rome, but then he died. Sulla took over again, and for a while the old aristocrats were in power again. And then round two, because neither side had totally defeated the other, then you get Caesar and Cassius and Brutus and Mark Antony. And if you watched HBO's Rome, I know you didn't, but your audience, they skip to Caesar and Pompey and Cassius and everyone else. And I can't remember if they explained that this was an ongoing problem with just, like any advanced democracy, like the British Empire, like America. You get a point where there's these upper aristocrats and there's two factions in the assembly fighting each other just for power and influence. One upper one and one lower one that wants it. I'm sorry this is taking so long to explain, but if you saw Rome, I could at least go, well, it's the early generation before those two. So they were using these terms when they were describing it. Well, there's this younger faction and they're new men. And I went, new men? You mean they're like the Populares? Oh, you know Roman history. Another example is a Spanish colonial history, more so than America. In the Americas, I don't know what's like in Canada, where I talk about this in my videos. You have a distinction. They had a structured class system in colonial South America and Central America between
aristocrats born in Spain and ethnically Spanish people born in Mexico.
Yeah.
The Peninsulares from the peninsula in Spain and the Criollos who were like, we're not Creole, we're ethnically Spanish. They're like,
yeah, but you just descend from the conquistadors who were up-jumping soldiers when we came here.
you're not real aristocrats like I am.
Yeah, we have the same in Canada with the French and the Quebecois.
Yeah, and I've seen it with America. I know it's like how, well, yeah, you guys aren't real Brits anymore. Yeah, you run a powerful shipping company and you're wealthier than a lot of aristocrats, but you're new men. You're not. You started out as poor colonists, but even though they're aristocrats,
Is that
these are aristocrats.
Is that where the surname Newman comes from?
Well, that could come from a couple of them. Maybe you were just the new guy in town. But
Yeah.
point is, it's like Roman history, and they align like that. So what happened in Valyria? It has a similar history to Rome. They went out and conquered. This is in the animated featurettes, if you can find them, a link to them in the description here, everyone. They explain this briefly, that if you hunt around for the histories and lore featurettes, that, well, Valyria started out as this young upstart power on its peninsula, which is kind of like Italy. Then they ran into the Giscari Empire, which is sort of like Carthage mixed with Egypt, Phoenician.
Yeah, I ran across.
You were mentioning that,
yeah. In terms of
they're like
the scepter, I think.
And like the Punic Wars, they fought these 5 huge wars of the Giscari, who were the empire in Essos up to that point.
Okay.
And they had more numbers, but they had the Valyrians had dragons, and they didn't. So they conquered the Giscari, and then a couple of thousand years later, they moved west and conquered the region of the modern free cities. They conquered the Roinar, who were the ancestors of the Dornish, which is sort of like Greece.
Okay.
So anyway, after a couple of thousand years, there were these waves of conquest with dragons, and then they conquered everything. Like anything else was too distant to be worth conquering. Like conquering Westeros to them would be like Julius Caesar saying, we're going to conquer Britain, and he did it for fun. But why would we conquer this backwater? There's nothing there worth taking. It's poor. So anything else is like, let's conquer Ibn up in the frozen islands in the north. It's why bother conquering them. So they conquered pretty much everything that was easy to conquer or worth conquering. And they sat around for a couple of hundred years, and like the Pax Romana, this is the Pax Valyria. About 600 years later, just like Rome, with no new enemies. A lot of Rome's economy was based on conquest, plunder. They didn't generate a lot of wealth. Just the rich get rich and the poor get poorer. Over time, power got concentrated, and like the Galactic Republic, or rather the Galactic Republic like Rome, the Senate has divided into 2 factions who are fighting each other, and they're not really concerned with people. So it's a democracy in decline. And if people go, oh, this is on the nose, well, this is what happened to Rome. It's a parallel they're drawing, but it's a damn good parallel.
Yeah.
It's not like, we're making up that they had immigration problems. Rome had problems with this, diversity problems. So it was a really good choice, but this is exactly what happened to Rome. So with that long and rambling introduction out of the way, that they had wars of conquest. The wars of conquest are now centuries ago. They've had long period of peace where they are the only superpower, but the ruling class has become corrupt, and functionally it isn't a democracy anymore, that your votes are really meaningless. There are 2 parties of people. You probably think I'm talking about Canada in your context. Everyone who hears my words is talking about, there's at least 2 parties, and they're only really trying to line their own pockets, and they don't care about the voters anymore. That's what happens.
Or the United States.
Yes. So just...
You're dealing with
there isn't one good side and one bad side. One side happens to be in power, one doesn't.
Yeah.
Which is what happened to Rome.
Yeah.
So there's 3 factions. And when I say there's 3 major factions, I mean, this is as if I'm telling you about, this is a show called Game of Thrones. Well, to describe the war, there's the Starks, the Lannisters, and the Targaryens, which is enough to watch season 1, but I'd be leaving out the Greyjoys or the Tyrells or... So there's more factions in this. These are the main ones that the story follows.
Sure.
So, and please, everyone, remark in the comments if you at least watched Rome and or read the novels, so you know how...
After you post this, I'm going to stick around in your comment section and answer questions if anyone's confused.
I'd like to help. So, if you're thinking of brainstorming costume design ideas for characters, these are the 3 factions.
Okay.
And I described in the original leak. The Sphinxes, the Young Dragons, and the Freeholders. The Sphinxes are the original aristocracy of Valyria. They descend from the original old families. They're blue bloods. Mm-hmm. They're the optimates from Rome. The old, we were in power before the waves of conquest. We descend from the original kings and priests, the original noble class. They're the original, they're the older faction. The young dragons are, of course, the younger faction. They're everyone who started out as a common soldier and then turned into a powerful warlord during the waves of conquest and got dragon lord status through wealth and plunder. Like hundreds of years ago, they've been in power as a family for generations, but they're still, it's like the Sphinx is calling them new guy.
Sure.
These young dragons, and they're kind of upstarts. Have you ever heard the phrase "young Turks"?
Yeah,
from the fall of the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah.
These young Turks, this vibrant, younger new class of the go-getters. So there's this upstart younger class. I don't know how much of the books you know. The Tyrells aren't really respected in the Reach because everyone goes, the Florence outrank them. They're up-jumped younger families. Or the Tullys, for example, like, you were never kings. They made you rulers because you helped the Targaryens in their wars of conquest. Mm-hmm. The younger, or for TV viewers, the way Bronn, in the books, I can't believe that I'm going all over the place. Bronn, in the books at least, married Lawless Stokeworth, and he's now the Lord of House Stokeworth.
Oh,
I can't believe the TV show dropped that because they were setting that up. And I was talking about costuming in the other video I got.
I have to say, Lawless dresses like a Targaryen because the Crown Lands outside
the King's Landing are still loyal to the Targaryens, which is interesting. But in the books, the Stokeworths are Targaryen allies. But I don't know what they're going to do with that in Season 8. They probably just dropped it. But it's the rise of Bronn in the books is hilarious. He starts out as this sellsword that Tyrion met in an inn. Mm-hmm. And by the later books, he's the Lord of Stokeworth.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite characters.
Oh, yeah. That he challenges his wife's older sister's brother-in-law to a duel. He wins by fighting dirty, and everyone's just, he was a better lord than the other guy. And it was like, he's just this up-jumped soldier. That's basically what the young dragons are Bronn as a social class.
Well, it's kind of like in King's Landing where you have the City Watch are, you don't have to be a knight, but you can move your way up. Whereas if to be on the King's Guard, you have to actually be a knight or nobility of some type.
Better example from costuming.
Yeah.
You know how Clapton kept saying that with Robert Baratheon, he was a lord, he wasn't a king, that to show that he isn't born to the throne, he won it on the battlefield. He dresses like a soldier would. He dresses functionally in well-made materials.
Yes.
He's in effect, they're like Robert very specifically. That whole, I won my power on the battlefield, we're the soldier class, and I'm not this old royal lineage, I'm relatively new, and people think he's this up-jumped usurper.
Yeah.
That's what the young dragons are like.
Okay.
And so, these young dragons here.
Now, let me go back to this. But the Sphinx, obviously, it sounds Egyptian.
Well, the thing is, turns out, and this is a shock to book fans, they reveal that the Sphinx is the original symbol of Valyria before they found dragons.
Okay.
And if that sounds shocking to you, it's because the TV show cut all this out. That, and I talk about this in my videos, 8 hours of stuff. I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep this shorter. That if someone told you, it's the Long Night prequel, and the Stark's original symbol was the badger, and then they found dire wolves and adopted the you go, you're making that up just for the sake of making that up, right? But in the books,
in Canada, our national animal is the beaver. So.
A proud and industrious animal.
It is.
What is that?
So
did you know they're actually filming in Canada?
I heard something about them filming in Alberta, I think.
They've had to film when she meets Nymeria again. They actually filmed outside. So hooray, Canada on screen. I mean, they technically filmed the bear in America, but in a sound stage with the bear. That's not. That's Canadian woods and stuff. So
a badger, but a badger is similar. Like, it's probably resourceful and
My point is, they didn't set it up. Of just. In thousands of years, no one bothered to mention that, our original symbol before the direwolf was the badger. Mm-hmm. You're pulling that out of your rear end here. In the books,
there is heavy mention of Valyria and Sphinxes.
Yeah, okay.
The show's never done this. And again, my whole video on the Sphinxes, I cut up into 3 parts. The first part is me reading off every time they mention Valyrian Sphinxes, which is a lot. to just show to people gradually, they're not making that up. In fact, book fans are wondering, why are there all these references to Sphinx statues in Valyria if your symbol is a dragon?
Yeah, well, and also in Marine, though, we see a lot of sort of Egyptian style.
Oh, I'm getting to that.
Okay.
So I don't know how they're going to play. I don't know how they're going to play that, but that they go, well, the original symbol was a sphinx, and like in the books, when they go to Old Town, there's these giant sphinx statues they took from the ruins of Valyria. So this is a pretty famous thing to anyone who's read the books of. Why are there sphinx images all the time? So instead of rejecting it out of hand, if you tell a book reader, well, originally it was the sphinx, you go, yeah, there were a lot of sphinx statues associated with Valyria. So we'll see where that goes. So I'm going to talk about Slaver's Bay in a minute, actually, but there's these two factions fighting each other, as the sphinxes have power and the young dragons are the young upstarts who want power. And the Targaryens are there, and they're a minor member of the young dragons.
Yeah.
That even relative to other young dragons, they're not considered too important. They're the top 40 families of this empire that runs the world. They own like 5 dragons at least, but that's relatively unimportant. Like the sphinxes could have like 24 per family or something. So what happened was, I'm giving the brief overview, then I'm going to talk about each one. The third faction are called the Freeholders. They are not dragon lords. They're the local power elites from all the provinces. Specifically, they're rich bankers and merchants. Their money is from wealth. It's like Illyrio Mopatis, like the Iron Bank of Bravos, Littlefinger. They're these wealth from trade and commerce. And this sort of happened in Rome, too. I keep comparing
sort
them.
of like entrepreneurs?
Well, I keep comparing them
To the Separatist Alliance from Star Wars.
Sure.
Because Star Wars was itself ripping off of this is what happened to Rome.
So just, when you think of, well, they run powerful trade cartels for different resources, that each one controls a different industry, and they got rich from that. And just there was peace instead of war for a couple of hundred years by this point. That logically, the ruling class that was based on military conquest isn't getting that much money anymore compared to people who prosper during times of peace. So like how Littlefinger is manipulating everyone with his money, because in the books they talk about this more, and I talk about this in the video, that the old-minded aristocracy do not think Littlefinger is a threat, because they go, he doesn't have any lands or armies. They're like, well, he's got money. And they're like, what's money ever done? These old style. You ever watch Downton Abbey?
Yes, I love that movie.
I love it too. Just that whole, Grafton's here, we don't talk about money. Money comes from the land. It's that kind of crisis of unlike mentalities. And they're called the Freeholders because the formal name of Valyria, it's not an empire. I mean, it's ruled by a senate. So it's called the Freehold of Valyria, the Valyrian Freehold. So they're the Freeholders. And this is all in the books. It goes, allegedly, in theory, any freeborn landholder had the right to vote. Freeborn landowners. But they say in practice, it became an oligarchy like the late Roman Republic, where, look, obviously this is being dominated by an elite class of politicians and their donors, rather than one man, one vote. That is a lie by this point.
Sure.
So,
like super PACs.
Yeah, the super PAC. So that's what's really going on. And so it's not really a democracy, and the freeholders are all the provinces. This is also what happened to Rome, sort of, that they're more of a mishmash of a couple of people who, there were a couple of civil wars all at once in the 1st century BC, where these are people that Sulla and Marius did fight. That there were pop-up rebellions called the Social War of 91 BC. It really seems inspired by that there were all these pop-up rebellions in the provinces who were going, we were loyal to Rome during the Punic Wars, we are paying our taxes, and our votes have become meaningless. Or, we don't have the right to vote, actually. They never extended it to them. They're Italian allies, and it's just, we are serving in your military, we're getting nothing out of this, so bit of that, bit of client states in North Africa rebelling against them.
And are they paying taxes? They're paying taxes, right?
Well, I don't think in the Roman context, or in this context, they pay taxes, but like our votes become meaningless.
Sure.
So, and again, mishmash with Star Wars because Star Wars is also based on Rome, the prequel trilogy. So the Freeholders are this other group. So I'm going to kind of go in reverse order now. So going a little more deep. Think of this in terms of costume design. For those of you listening out there who read The World of Ice and Fire or read the main novels, and they talk about the different free cities, the Freeholders are the new faction that just formed. That they sat up and realized, we're wealthier than all the Dragon Lords put together, and they've exhausted themselves in internal fights, and they're bankrupt, and we should make a power play. And that's the rivalry of this new third faction that's based on wealth and money, even though they don't have dragons.
Yeah.
So they're like the Separatist Alliance going, we'll break away from these guys and make our own thing or try to get voting rights, or one or the other. So they don't have one uniform culture. They're an alliance of different power elites from the different provinces. So like Star Wars, think about designing the costumes for the Trade Federation or the Techno Union or the Banking Clan, right?
Yeah. Go ahead. I heard.
I'm asking your opinion on the different factions in the Separatist Alliance. They look nothing alike.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
No common religion, no common costume. They're sub factions who have joined together as one new one. So they're interesting in their diversity. That they're from all over the Valyrian Freehold, which can come from wherever. So you can have people from Volantis and like the other free cities we never saw before, and they're based on industries, like the textile industry, like Quohor would be the timber industry, but like I was talking about the Italian city-states before, like Tirosh is the heart of the color dye industry. Their freeholders are wealthy from owning color dyes. Mir is the heart of the textile industry, the weaving, looms textile industry. They are, what would people from Mir look like? Were they craftsmen who were running the textile, like the looms and mills of the Low Countries in real life? What would these people look like? And that's just the free cities. You'll see like the early Slavers Bay and other colonies they have that don't exist anymore. Just places we never really got to visit in the original TV show that they're really going to round out a lot more. And for those who have read this, like Pentos is going to be more or less like, they're not going to be that different, but it'll be actually showing, wow, this is what Pentos really looks like. This is what Tirosh people are like.
Pentos actually, their costumes look a little bit Roman to me.
Yeah, it's supposed to look Mediterranean-y to show that it's warmer there. But the thing they reveal, everyone's excited about this, is, Valyria had colonies in Sothorios, which is their fantasy version of Africa. And when you look on a map, this actually makes sense. The World of Ice and Fire only revealed this 5 years ago.
No, I know this because I've gone to your wiki, but Sothorius is the third continent.
It's the third known continent, and the TV show streamlined this by not even mentioning it, even though it's on maps.
Yeah, I don't even remember hearing about it.
No, it's never been mentioned by name. And people even SNL was joking. There's no. Why isn't there a South Orios? There is. The TV show cut it out.
Yeah, that's funny.
And really, the way it was described to me is that Valyria and Zamatar are the two axes around which the story revolves. Which is, they're the King's Landing and Winterfell dynamic we had in season 1 in the earlier seasons, where you have the capital city and then you have the province in revolt.
Yeah.
So they had to meet somewhere, and it was just, okay, they'd meet in the wealthiest province. Well, it turns out the wealthiest province is Zamatar on the coast of Sothorios. And talking with you about theater production and stuff, that, I don't know, you see all these wish lists these days, pie in the sky, this is what we want in Long Night. Do you seriously think they're going to have Winterfell actually a shy on the scale of the King's Landing physical set, and E.T., and all this other stuff? How many fully realized sets do they have one season to the next? 3 or 4, on the scale of Winterfell and King's Landing. These guys, again, they're responsible people that they go, we have planned out every scene already, that we know these are physically the sets and costume amounts we can build.
Yeah.
And ingeniously, the way they explain it, in the video I talked about the physical sets and locations, I talked about costumes for a while, that we might never see Tirosh on screen, because a Taroshi representative on, like, the Freeholder Council will come to meet in Zamatar. So through their dress and their actions and behavior and personality, we will learn a lot about Tirosh. Compare this to Serial Pharrell in Season 1, that we didn't need to build a Bravo set and
Beggar the budget. Begging our treasury.
no, you can have a character from Bravos come to King's Landing.
Yes.
Like that, but more prominently. Their faction is a group like the Separatist Alliance. You'll see representatives from these places without actually having to show all of them.
Yeah, or even Oberyn, in King's Landing before we actually went to Dorne. You know, you saw his clothing.
Yeah,
or Illyria.
like with the problem with sending Oberyn and Ilaria to King's Landing in Season 4 was one thing, versus Clapton saying, I can't make all of Dorne at such short notice in terms of costuming, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So I would compare it to that Dorne dynamic. Season 4, Oberyn comes to King's Landing.
I'm actually kind of surprised that at the very beginning they didn't just sit down and, like, we have this thing in, we were talking about Bibles. We have this thing in theater. It's called a prompt book or Bible. And in the prompt book, which is used by the stage manager, oftentimes before you even do a play, you might do all of the sketches, thumbnails, or what have you of everything, just to sort of say, this is what this would look like, and have it all laid out. So I'm kind of surprised they didn't do that originally with Game of Thrones. They just did it. I mean, I suspect that it might have been that they just didn't think it would get picked up, maybe, because the pilot, the original pilot was kind of a disaster, and
they had a lot of problems with that. And so when you're thinking about the Freeholders as a faction, when you guys are the audience is brainstorming what they look like, they look like wealthy merchants from the Free Seas. They're the precursors of the people who rule it today, like Illyrio and Pentos.
Yeah.
So, but of the different ones we never saw before. So you'll see a guy from Pentos, but you'll see Quohor. In my videos, I point out, Quohor is sort of like Poland in that it's in the middle of a forest. It's on the eastern side of everything. And I put in these pictures of Polish hussar armor, and I was delighted to be watching your videos and go, oh, you're using that as an example, for one of the other things. I think of them as looking like that.
Yeah, and it's funny because actually I did a video on Sleepy Hollow, and the Headless Horseman is wearing a hussar, sort of a version of a Polish hussar uniform. Although one of my other viewers said they thought it was terrible. But because
he was a mercenary, he was with the Hessians.
He was a mercenary, and they ended up having to they had to execute him because he was just really awful. So, but I'm trying to remember, when was I using the hussar as an example? It was, I can't remember.
It was some kind of, it was like the Unsullied plate armor a little, I think.
That's what it was. But they had the wings, right?
They're to scare enemy horses.
Yeah.
And
but they go down, I think, inside of their breastplates.
Yeah, so they're not that different. So these different places you'll see, they're not that different across time, but they're places that were never on screen before, of really rounding out, okay, this is what Marine nobles would look like in their prime. This is what Volantis really looks like when we're actually developing it. Mir, which is the head of the textile industry. What is Zamatar wealthy from? A couple of things. Locally, Sothorios is sort of the colony where a lot of the gold mines are. So, and it's African. So, you interviewed Ruth Carter.
Yes, I did.
So, just when you think of this Africa-inspired, they're wealthy from mining and the minerals. They're like, I keep thinking of Mansa Musa, who kind of inspired Black Panther. The wealthiest man who ever lived. He was this West African king who had these huge gold mines. Mm-hmm. They're wealthy from that, but the big thing is if you look at a map, Zamatar is on the trade routes coming back from Yeti.
Okay.
The trade in the Jade Sea goes clockwise. So anyone going east has to go north, around the north edge and circle around. So that's why Karth is so wealthy, that everyone going to Yeti has to pay trade tolls to them. Well, just looking at a map, you realize, and just the brilliance, this never occurred to me, but as a book fan, this made complete sense. Why would Sothorios be this the wealthiest colony?
They're on the trade routes coming back west from Yeti, which go around the south as they complete the circle.
So when you're thinking of a city, it's sort of like the southern version of Karth.
Okay.
And that they're this melting pot. People from all over can be found in the docks there, and it is fabulously wealthy. Mm-hmm. And specifically, what are they wealthy from? Uranium? Petroleum oil? No. What are wealthy things to people in a medieval era? Spices and silks. Mm-hmm. So another thing, and this isn't theory, they directly confirmed this to me, because it's a trade hub, there's a sizable number of people there from Yiti and from the Summer Islands, as well as from Sothorios itself. So again, that whole send Oberyn to King's Landing, don't try to build Dorne on a budget. Mm-hmm. You will see characters from these places and learn of their culture and represent them through their actions, through their costume design. So the POV character, the lead character of the Freeholder faction, is an East Asian woman who is, there's the representative on like the Freeholder Council from Pentos or from Volantis. The one the story follows is the one who runs the silk industry in Zamatar. Okay. So I just thought that was interesting
sounds
for
like
you.
Zanzibar.
Zamettar. Yeah. He might have picked it because of that, but and it's on maps. So again, my 8-hour extravaganza.
That's on Sothorios.
Yes, it's on the coast of Sothorios. It's at this big river delta, and so just for a costuming perspective, she's this faction leader, and she's wealthy to the point that her wealth is political power, and she's wealthy from running the silk trade. So what would her people at court look like? Mm-hmm. And also, not just that, we have a lot of silk, that, she was born a slave. No, I'm sorry, she wasn't born a slave. She was captured and sold as a slave in UT and wound up in Valyria, sold along the trade routes. But like how Viserys remembers what the old Targaryen style was, she looks and acts Yeet, and she's not the only Yeetish person in Zamatar. They said, well, it's not like an enclave, it's a melting pot, but there's a sizable population of people from Yiti there.
Now, is the silk from Yiti though? Like we have, in our world?
Silk really only comes from Yiti. All the silk, it doesn't come from Westeros, it doesn't come from Essos. Everything, it's all east of the Dothraki and Karth. The one exception I will point out is that for whatever reason, the island of Nath is perfect for growing silk caterpillars. Mm-hmm. But I imagine, why would we buy that? It's not from far away, therefore it is not valuable. I don't know how that's going to play out. With the big source of silk is, Yiti is basically China.
Yeah, I was reading it's like the golden age of China, or at least that's what I sort of had read.
Well,
I don't know if I got that from
it's like Imperial China, but much like Westeros, they've seen better days. Part of Martin's whole, everything used to be better in the Empire of the Dawn. Things are even cooler than they are now, and we're all a bunch of fighting warlords. But Yiti is the oldest civilization in the world.
Okay.
They started right after the Long Night, and where other people fell, like the Giscari fell, and then eventually the Valyrians fell, Yiti just kept going.
Okay.
And by this point, their culture is 8,000 years old of continuous history. They are really refined. Even Valyria is kind of the poor country cousin compared to them. Don't have dragons, but they're just this utter. When you think about like medieval Europe compared to Ming China, where this utterly sophisticated, the costuming, I can only imagine. I can't imagine what Yitish characters would be costumed like. And so when you're showing Zamatar, it's this rich showcase of people costumed from all over the world of all sorts of different cultures, from across the Valyrian Empire, which spans 3 continents. Then, because they have trade outposts in Westeros. So there isn't one uniform look for the Freeholders. It's showcasing all these cultures that were mentioned in the books but never really shown before. But okay, you can pretty much infer that, right? Mm-hmm. What I'd actually have to describe are the Sphinxes and the young dragons.
Okay.
The Valyrians actually have dragons. The thing is, the young dragons, if the TV show never showed Daenerys until season 7, and then she showed up, if they never showed anything outside of Westeros, and then suddenly Daenerys showed up wearing her costume from the end of season 3 and beginning of season 4. Remember that one? I just watched your video on that.
The blue one?
The blue one, which when she's right at the end and beginning, like the first episode of season 4.
Yes.
If she just showed up then and she went, oh, yes, I was on the Eastern Continent, what would you infer about the Eastern Continent from her costume? About what her culture is as a Targaryen? What would you infer about, is this the Targaryen mode of dress?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Oh, I don't know, that it's hot? It's,
That, oh, this is what Targaryens dress like.
Oh, yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, wait, no, those are Dothraki riding leggings.
Yeah.
That's a Carthene dress.
Yeah.
That's a Giscari, Slaver's Bay cape and collar and the shoulder pads like the Unsullied.
Mm-hmm.
But the texturing, the embroidery, that's Targaryen.
Yes.
So it's really four things all mashed up.
Yeah.
Well,
Absolutely.
it turns out that's sort of like a cultural trait of the Valyrians that's in the blood, is they like to mix and match things.
Oh, that's interesting.
That it's like the Romans. That is the exact comparison. It's like how the Romans assimilated things. So because the young dragons are out in the provinces a lot, they pick up little cultural bits from all the conquered peoples. I keep thinking, like, remember how Salador San wore a sash because he's from the Free Cities, he's a flashy pirate? Like, you'd see, like, I think like Robert Baratheon, they wear functional clothing. They're soldiers, so they're the soldier class, so they wear functional things.
The Second Sons, they sort of, I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
The Second Sons, they sort of pick up things along the way, like they're wearing some Pentoshi.
They're wearing bits and pieces.
Bits and pieces, yeah.
These are wealthy aristocrats, but really like Daenerys, they'll pick up, oh, I like that boot thing, and the Sphinx will be looking at them going, you're wearing a sash from the Giscari. Mm-hmm. We're Valyrians, don't do that.
Okay, yeah.
So a big part of that. So because they spend more time in the provinces and they're the lower aristocracy, they were never pure to begin with, pure enough to be upper crust. A number of them even marry non-Valyrians. Mm-hmm. And as long as you have one Valyrian parent, they might even give you a dragon. But the older aristocrats go, the POV character for the young dragons is a biracial black woman. They say, well, she has black skin, but she has Targaryen white hair. Like, she looks like black woman with Valyrian hair, like a Daenerys wig.
Yeah.
And, she has a dragon. Clearly, she's an aristocrat.
Do they marry their siblings, though, as well? Or family?
No, that's the thing. That only the upper crust are, well, if they're marrying another race, clearly they're not married siblings.
That's true. Sorry. But,
so they're not as serious about it. They're known to, but they don't always do it. Mm-hmm. Much like how the Targaryens in Westeros usually married their siblings, but at times they're like, I feel like marrying a Dornish person for a political gain or something.
Okay, sure.
They didn't treat it as an ironclad rule, which, of course, the Sphinxes do treat it as an ironclad rule. If we practice, we have to keep the bloodline pure. We have to keep the bloodline pure. Mm-hmm. Any deviation from this is terrible. Whereas the young dragons are like, well, we tried it, but we're not really that strict about it.
Well, it's the same with royalty.
Yeah.
They want to keep the blood blue.
Yeah, so you got like a Meghan Markle situation where the main character is this embodiment of the big problem of the show is, cultural assimilation and, immigration. This is something that happened to Rome of we're letting all these other people in, and should we extend them citizenship because we've been ruling over them for thousands of years, or let them have functional voting powers again. Mm-hmm. And, it's a bit on the nose, but, it's on the nose for a reason. And it's not like they made this up. Rome was like this. These are issues that was faced in Rome. Extend citizenship to keep the army functioning because we're not getting enough people. So from a costume standpoint, think of it as they're functional. They're soldiers like Robert, but you can clearly see they're wearing a bit from one of the free cities here or a sash there. That this looks like a big, and this is the core of what I'm saying in this video, a big theme of this show is cultural synthesis. Mm-hmm. And how do we define a culture? That at what point, I'm asking philosophically, at what point does this stop being, I'm wearing a Stark costume, but I thought this sash from the Free Cities was nice. It's a Stark costume with a sash. At what point does that conceptually become a new look? Mm-hmm. Unified, this is a new thing. The example I use is what if Daenerys came and we never saw, well, actually she went through 4 other places, and this is bits of Dothraki, bits of Karth, bits of Slaver's Bay, bits of Targaryen. At what point does that become her and not just bits of other things?
Yeah. Well, I was sort of thinking, like, even like the Dothraki, when they come to Westeros, they start, wearing bits and pieces.
But yeah, they looted the Lannister dead because they needed winter coats.
Because they're kind of like,
the exact reason they said it in the commentary was they needed winter coats.
They needed winter coats. So, like, for instance, like First Nations, when they were trading with, the white man or whatever, they would start, here, I'll give you this if you give me this. And, like, so, for instance, in Outlander, they show them they're wearing, like, red military coats over top of their, First Nations clothing type of thing. So, but...
that mashing together of cultures and the mixing, matching is very interesting.
We're even kind of going through that right now, even as a society now, with, like, is this cultural appropriation for me? Can I wear this safely without it being called cultural appropriation? Or
I don't know if you can splice this in or at least link it, but I was watching your videos and I noted for the reviewers your delightful video Costumes of Essos 2 times 7 minutes 15 seconds in, quote, "In the history of clothing, there's often crossovers across cultures because they oftentimes borrowed heavily from one another. A prime example of this is how the Romans copied not only the clothing and architecture of ancient Greece, but also copied their gods. The Valyrians are the Romans in this."
Oh, okay. The Valyrians are the Romans.
And they copy things. Yeah. And so I'm talking with my source about this, and they're showing there's a lot of concept art that they must have hired all the people to do the calendars.
Even the gods.
Well, the big thing they talked about was the gods, that, like, you can tell some of the Valyrian gods now are blatantly copied from other people. Like the example they says, like, one looks like a harpy, and you can tell this is something you picked up from the Ascari. The artistic representation of it. Like, let me think of an example. Like in Christian art, like the way we draw Jesus isn't what people looked like. No one in Judea wore their hair long. We know that from frescoes. Mm-hmm. That's the way the Romans drew Apollo. Yeah. We copied the art styles, and we're just copying. In the Christian Trinity, the Father is drawn like Zeus, this fluffy white-bearded man in the sky. That we copied art styles.
Yes, absolutely.
Sometimes they copy gods. Sometimes they copied their look, and okay, I'm pretty sure Meraxes didn't originally look like a harpy.
Yeah, like one of the things, like one of my favorite areas of clothing is ancient Greece, and so like a hymation, which is like a long cloth, becomes a toga. Or a chlamys. I don't know what the Roman equivalent of it is, but a chlamys would have been the cape, and then the Romans sort of ended up a stola, I think it might be called in Roman or ancient Rome. So I always sort of thought that was really, and even the statues, right? They do a lot of the statues.
Oh yeah. So this works, and they showed, I couldn't see it and I couldn't redraw it anyway. Just, and like with their costuming, you'll be able to see that they pick up bits of cultural things from the provinces. So you'll see the Freeholders, and then you'll see young dragons who they're wearing this functional Valyrian military armor, which looks like, what we draw Targaryen dragon riders like in our artwork, mixed with bits of other things. And you'll be seeing, oh, look, they're like this hybrid thing. They're the soldiers moving around the provinces. And, one other point on the Freeholders, because you mentioned, they're not, the Dothraki aren't mercenaries. You mentioned the Second Sons?
Yes.
Well, when you're looking to include diversity in your show, foreign mercenaries are always the perfect answer. Like in the books, for your listeners, please talk in the comments, the Brave Companions are this group of mercenaries from the free cities that come to Westeros because Tywin hired them. And they're from all over. One of them is a Dothraki, one of them is from Ib, one of them is from Qohor. They're all over. So a way they're going to work in other peoples from the Far East, besides ET, is the Freeholders hired some foreign mercenaries who just came on the shipping routes. Mm-hmm. It's not forced diversity.
Were the Golden Company around then?
Oh, no. Yeah. The Golden Company was founded after the Blackfire Rebellion.
Oh, okay.
The first of 5. For you see, it's a long story.
Yeah.
No, they're like 100 years old. No.
Sure.
But so like other people, if you read the books, like the Jogosnai, who were like, if the Dothraki are the Turkish hordes of mounted warriors, they're like the Mongols or the Manchus, that they're the mounted hordes who are constantly fighting Yeti from their northern borders, from the steppes. So they said, well, the show is going to gradually work in other people from the Far East that you might never see these regions as just, oh yeah, we hired some along the shipping lanes. So like you'll see a Jogosnai mercenary or something.
Sure.
And you'll have to think, well, what would a Jogosnai costume look like? So stuff like that. And unlike with Game of Thrones, I kept telling you, like, they didn't really know what they were doing. Like, there's videos of Benioff going, flashbacks are a lazy plot device, therefore I don't use them. Like, in his DVD commentaries, he later admits, I don't use flashbacks because I never got a writing degree and I'm actually bad at them.
Oh, my gosh.
You know, in his commentary for 25th Hour, there's this whole thing where he's struggling over flashbacks. And he goes, I usually avoid doing flashbacks because, frankly, I'm bad at them.
Yeah.
And it's just the contrast with that and him in one of the other things saying, oh, no, flashbacks are stupid. Well, because you don't know how to do them well. The series Bible does promise that as a storytelling technique, we will have flashbacks. So it won't be a primary scale location, but you could see, like, Yeti in one episode. On the scale of that we saw Pentos or we saw Volantis. It's not a primary scale location, obviously. But we could visit it via flashback.
Now, in terms of the POV, so it's just done from this one character? There isn't multiple POVs?
Oh, there are more. These are the three that I know of.
Yeah, the three that you know of. Okay.
Okay, so there's the Freeholders POV. Is she was from Yeti, but she was sold into slavery, but then she rose up to become the wealthiest woman in the Valyrian freehold.
Yeah.
And she sounds like book readers will know. She's basically the widow of the waterfront from Volantis, but from Yeti. And
you said she's like Southeast Asian or East Asian?
She's Chinese, basically.
Chinese, yeah. And then what about the Sphinx? Is that going to be one
and
character?
the Young Dragon's main character is she's this biracial black woman. The Targaryens are in it. They didn't. I asked, are Daenerys the Dreamer and Aenar Targaryen in it? And they said, well, yeah, but they're not politically that important yet.
Okay.
So the Targaryens
this biracial black woman, she's not a Targaryen? Or she
I don't know. I mean, she might be like a half-sister, because there have been black Targaryens when someone had a black mistress or something before, like with Aegon IV had a black child. So I don't know. She might be a cousin. She's at least she's their political ally. She's on their faction.
Okay.
But, like the Sphinxes are looking down on them if you don't take incest marriage seriously, and you're acculturating with all of these foreign, it's like a British person going, you Canadians, you're all speaking, you're all using words from Native Americans and picking up their fashions, and you don't act like real British people anymore.
Yeah.
So...
they make fun of us.
But with America, if you guys don't drink tea right, and all the, you're acting like a mix of Spanish colonial, Native American, and French influences, that your culture has changed from contact with other people.
We're a new culture, really.
They're going, you're not a pure-blooded Englishman. Mm-hmm. And it's not, I'm not a pure-blooded Viking, Welsh, Roman, Celtic person. Like, what do you mean pure-blooded English? What does that even mean?
Yeah.
So the joke is, what is a sphinx? In the books, they say, well, a sphinx is a bit of this and a bit of that. A sphinx is a chimera. That the sphinxes, as a faction, are like the Romans, where even though you could have like them going, oh, you're spending too much time in the East with these Persians and picking up foreign cults. Now here I am worshipping Jupiter. Where is the contrast in that? What is Jupiter? You ripped off Zeus. You absorbed the Greeks. So the thing with the Sphinxes is, it's like how the Romans, earliest Romans, the Greeks are even later than that, you absorbed the Etruscans, you absorbed the Samnites, the infamous Roman gladius sword. They admit, oh yeah, it's a Samnite sword. They had better swords than we did, so we copied their design.
Yeah, why wouldn't you?
So what is pure Roman when the Romans were always... They said other people like the Greeks were prideful. They never adapted. We copied what was best from peoples we conquered, and therefore we got good at it. We were victorious, and other people wouldn't change their ways. So like the early Romans, the Sphinxes, on a scale of 5,000 years, because that's when their empire started, have been absorbing local peoples. So the young dragons are like an early stage of what the sphinxes have been doing for thousands of years. From a design standpoint, I mean. Like, you're a young dragon, you're wearing a sash from Tyros or something, right?
Yeah.
The way this thing, I didn't get a good look at this concept art. It's like, think of like how intricate like Cersei's throne room costume is in season 7.
Mm-hmm.
And then think of all this amazing filigree. It's just like, wait a minute. Your greaves on your forearm, they're different from your shoulder embroidery, and your leggings are different. Like Daenerys is a mix of 4 things. They're like a mix of a dozen or 2 dozen things so subtly because it's been done for so many centuries that at first glance, it looks like one unified pattern, one unified design.
Yeah.
That at first glance, you don't realize this is a mixture of everyone they conquered.
Well, it's like that in England, or in Europe.
That when you peel apart, okay, that's Celtic and Germanic merged for so long, you don't even remember they were different.
Well, one of the things that really surprised me especially when I've been doing a lot of my costume history, is how much comes from the Vikings, the Norse.
Oh, yeah.
How it influenced the Scots and the Highlanders, and then the British, would have intermarried with the
so it's amazing just peeling apart how everything merged. Just your quote summarized really well. You should splice that back in of just they were absorbing things, and they worked out the backstory of the Valyrians on a scale of thousands of years. Whereas the Freeholders are breadth, they are depth. Just, wow, we got a sampling of each of the free cities, and they're kind of a new faction, so the Freeholders dress kind of gaudy because they're rich. The Valyrians, what I saw, they described them verbally, the sphinxes are really intricate because they're really old.
Yeah, so
there's this intricate merging.
The Freeholders would be like the Rodney Dangerfield, like in Caddyshack. I don't know how old you are.
Oh, yeah. Bye, Bushwood.
So he's like, so you got the old money of the Ted Baxter character, old money, and then you've got the new money.
It's also sort of, it's tiers. That it's really like they also look down. The Freeholders aren't even aristocrats. The young dragons are the guys they look down on as their perennial rivals. But I walked into this thinking, the Freeholders are the most interesting. They probably are to a lot of people. As a history major who likes, peeling back layers of things, the Sphinxes are the most interesting faction to me because they kept saying it's a mystery. They described me, an ongoing thing will be peeling back the layers of. It's like Daenerys in reverse, where you'll gradually see examples of peoples they conquered and realize, wait a minute, that embroidery is from that group they conquered. Like, they mentioned the Giscari as a big example. That was a big impact on their history. That like, if you see like a Harpy logo at one point in one of the background, in the embroidery, you'll realize, they picked up Giscari stuff. But it's so interwoven. I can't visualize this well. It looks like a coherent design, even though it's a mixture of a couple of other ones, because what's blatant for the young dragons, time has smoothed out for them. And, I had to use placeholder artwork for all this in my videos, that I use pictures of, have you ever seen Guillermo del Toro's Hellboy movies?
Oh, yeah.
Hellboy 2, The Golden Army, that when he shows elves, which are his, like Irish myth, elves as, the fair folk, these, token-like warriors, that his version of the elves, and I keep using pictures of Prince Nuada, because I think he got that right, of the elves who look really ancient.
Yeah.
That they're so ancient they're almost faded, because they're ossified from all their stuff. That look of this looks really ancient just looking at it, and really intricate. But the way they described to me was the young dragons look like people who are still around. Like, you can tell they're copying the Freeholders. The Sphinxes look like a mixture of peoples who don't exist anymore, but will gradually reveal them. Like, what do we know of the Etruscans other than this survived as a Roman absorption? Right? So, like, they mention this, there's this one line mentioned in the World Book that, the Cimmeri used to rule, Cymmeri, used to have kingdoms in the foothills of the Painted Mountains at the top of the Valyrian Peninsula, but they're not around anymore because the Valyrians wiped them out. So like in the series Bible, it says, well, they copied stuff from the Sumeri and they don't exist anymore.
Okay.
But like we'll show like embroidered, like this is what shoulder pads of the Sumeri looked like. How do we know what did the Sumeri look like? We know nothing other than they had shoulder pads like this. And they worked this out. Well, this is what the whole thing looked like, and this is the one surviving piece of it. I'm talking like even before the Gascari Wars, just like the logo. They didn't rule. I'm talking too fast. Like Valyria was at the southern tip of their peninsula. Like the lands along Summer north of that, there were other ancient peoples they wiped out we don't know about anymore. And a lot of it's just they thought up extinct races as bits and pieces of Sphinx costume. Just the amount of work and planning that went into this design.
Yeah.
We thought up races that don't exist anymore to explain how the Sphinxes dress. So, in my head, talking.
So sorry. So did you see any of the pictures? Did you see any?
So fast, I can't. Combined with the fact that I can't draw.
How did it work? Like, is this during your?
Well, they flipped the thing. They filmed. They flipped it in front of me, and like, oh, okay, and it looked real and impressive, but I couldn't repeat it to you. Other than they looked Targaryen-y, and they looked like combinations of things.
So do they have like somebody sort of like, and Marvel has a concept person? Like, for instance, when I did the Fifth Element video, they hired 2 really great comic book artists.
Well, what I do know from a cultural perspective, they hired religious scholar Reza Aslan to work out all of the religions and cultures in detail.
Okay.
From a costuming perspective, that means when you see, this is embroidery, this is a design from our religion, they worked out the religion in great detail.
Yeah.
And you'll see symbols from that in their costuming.
Okay, yeah. Because like I know, for instance, like I know in Game of Thrones, like Gemma Jackson and Michelle had to work really close together. Sorry, who was the original production designer?
Gemma Jackson.
It was Gemma.
I don't know if they have something on that scale yet. I know they have the series Bible.
So like, but for instance, when they did the Fifth Element, it was Jean-Paul Gaultier was the designer, but well before he came in, it was sort of like Jodorowsky's Dune. I don't know if you've watched that movie. He brought in.
It was unfinished.
Yeah, he brought in Giger.
Yes.
To H.R. Giger to do concepts, and he also brought in Moebius, and who's also on the Fifth Element, to work on all the concepts. And then they made this Bible, which was bound and everything. There's only, I don't know, a few copies.
That's basically what this series Bible is, though I don't know if there's one lead story person or if it's a combination of people.
Mm-hmm. So what happened, though, with, like, say, the Fifth Element, which is also Moebius, whatever you want to call him, when they finally brought in Jean-Paul Gaultier, he absorbed a lot of the concepts. Like, for instance, I don't know. Have you ever seen that movie, the Fifth Element? So, for instance, the diva, that was done by one of their concept artists, and then he then took it and made it into a costume, and it was all practical. So, or even like with we were talking earlier about Black Panther. So even before Ruth Carter came in, there's this guy named Ryan Meinerding. I don't know if I'm saying his name right. He does all the concepts for Marvel, and he actually would like render all of the the major characters even before the costume designer came in. So a lot of the stuff, the original concepts before Ruth even got in there, were kind of nailed down, and then she took it and then was like, okay, I'm going to now either adjust it or make it into a costume.
Well, yeah, for Civil War, but
yeah. Well, they had to. They changed it. They actually changed it they changed the Civil War one, the Black Panther, because he couldn't work in it apparently. So So they changed it, and then what had happened was, you were talking about some of the symbolism in Africa. So Ruth wanted to incorporate the triangles, which is an ancient symbol, sort of like a. In Africa, it apparently has a lot of meaning behind it. Actually, I've been sort of researching some triangles. Triangles can be masculine, feminine. It's the same with zigzag.
While you're mentioning that, I remember your video on the it's fun speculation, the symbolism, like maybe they were trying to make the Targaryen symbol look like a spiral.
Yeah.
Just maybe, I don't know, I'm not, maybe it is in universe, from a Doyleist universe perspective, did the art studio tried to make them look similar. I don't think they did, but maybe they did.
Well,
I can't say they didn't.
In my latest video, I'm sort of, the Ouroboros, or Ouroboros, however you want to say it. So the idea of the snake eating its own tail. If you look at the Targaryen sigil, it does kind of look like that as well. So it looks like a spiral, like a forward-moving spiral. But if you look at it, it actually looks like three-headed dragons trying to eat their own tails. So
what I want to say is, yes.
Yeah.
So you go.
But my understanding is that all of the sigils came from the books. Is that true?
Well, they're described in the books. They were not designed in the books. They had to hire a artist, Jim Staines, and he said he based them on real life medieval heraldry, such as like the Lannister lion looks like a classical European lion. But the Targaryen symbol, I haven't seen a dragon designed like that in classical medieval heraldry.
No, I haven't. Like the rose.
You think like a Welsh dragon, not a spiral like that.
Exactly. Like like the rampant lion. That the lion is the rampant lion, but the rose. This is something I just I've been doing recently. Is a cinquefoil, which is a type of a rose actually. So it's a 4-leaf rose, like the Tyrell rose. And they're usually yellow, like the sigil, and cinquefoil means 4-leafed, so that's what that is. And then it's used in the Wars of the Roses. So you've got the House of Lancaster, and you've got the
York Lannister,
and then Tudor. So the two roses, if you add them together, they become the Tudor rose, like combining them. So that rose actually is definitely a heraldry type thing. But the Targaryen sigil is something. Because I was looking at it, and I was like, yeah, it kind of looks like a spiral. It kind of looks like a Ouroboros, because there's these brooches actually that Dany gives to both Missandei.
Yeah.
And to Grey Worm, and they're wearing it in season 7, and it's a Ouroboros. But actually, it's funny because I found this on Reddit. There's this. I'm sorry, I'm getting off on a tangent here, guys.
No, it's okay.
It's the Ender Scrolls.
I went on quite a tangent.
Oh, okay. The Ender Scrolls Online have this logo, and it's like a lion eating its tail, then a dragon eating its tail, and then there's like another animal. I can't remember what it is. And I looked at, and so it is. It's exactly the same, except she's got 3 lions eating their own tails. Or dragons, I should say, eating their own tails. So, but apparently in Ouroboros or whatever, they are usually a serpent, but it can also be a dragon. So, I'm assuming he must have known that when he drew it, that a Ouroboros could be a dragon, not just.
Well, I wanted to bring up one other prequel point in that regard, because I saw it in your video of talking about and I was saying, again, I think it's just, symbolism. Who knows if they did intentionally.
Sure.
There's this thing in the books, in the World Book, where in the beginning of Fire and Blood, if anyone just got Fire and Blood over Christmas, like as soon as the Targaryen conquest happens, it says Aegon the Conqueror was the one who said this 3-headed dragon is going to be our sigil because Valyria didn't use heraldry the way Westeros does. Mm-hmm. It says it was not the custom of Valyria to have houses with words. Like, they never had house words before that. And they don't have heraldry designs. So this was one of the pages I saw pretty clearly. They were showing heraldry designs for the factions. And they said, well, okay, the Sphinx symbol is a Sphinx. And it's a Sphinx quotient. I looked it up. They used a heraldry database. That's how it looks like a Sphinx pose, resting. And the young dragon symbol, it's either the Targaryen symbol or a clear precursor to it.
Okay.
But it's obviously the basic idea. I don't know if it had 1 head or 3 heads. You could tell it was the spiral dragon thing. So I went, well, that's pretty cool, but remember there's that line in the World Book where they said that Valyrians didn't use heraldry like Westeros, and like they were the one finishing my sentence going, and I go, well, but the World Book says, and they go, that Valyria didn't use heraldry. We know that on the page here it explains, citing the World Book, that they don't use heraldry a lot. We're getting around that by saying that they didn't quote it exactly. They said, there will be a point in season 1 where there's a scene where they specifically invent the faction symbols.
Oh, okay.
So it's not just suddenly you see a Targaryen symbol. You will see someone sitting down, drawing and designing. This is why we're using a dragon that looks like this.
But I mean, one of the big questions is though, why are there three heads on the dragon?
Yeah, I don't understand. Yeah, maybe the one I saw only had one head. In universe, they said it was three heads for the three dragons of the Targaryen conquest. Mm-hmm. One for Aegon, two for his sisters. But Aegon's dragon was black. Why did he have a red dragon on black? When if anything, he should have had Valyrian the Black Dread was a black dragon. Why didn't he have the colors reversed? They didn't have a red dragon.
I don't know.
So I don't know. Maybe
red is a common color for dragons.
I don't know.
Like in Chinese, like in Chinese. Although I was funny because when I was doing some research about this, Chinese dragons are different than a British dragon. Or sorry, Chinese. No, sorry, a Chinese dragon.
Yes.
It's a wingless dragon, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I'm confused now. Yeah.
Well, some dragons in history, there were blue ones. There were silver ones. They were every color of the rainbow.
Mm-hmm. I just think in Asia, red dragon is the color. Red dragon. And I know in heraldry, there's certain rules about which colors you can put with what.
Metal shall not touch metal. Except when it does.
Yeah.
Unless you're displaying it proper, in which case... That is as in real life, in which case all rules are off.
So, and then there's just certain colors like that are used, and then there's ermine, which I pointed that out in a video. I'm like, I wonder why there's no ermine in the Game of Thrones.
House Florent.
Oh, you're right. Oh my God, they do have ermine. You're right. You know what?
I don't use it a lot.
I must have said that. I probably said that before I did that video. But the other thing someone mentioned to me is that there's no lace.
Moorish lace?
There's no lace.
Oh, you mean in heraldry?
No, not in heraldry, just lace in general. They don't use lace in the show. And
why not? The big thing they go is the most expensive textile is fine Moorish lace. That only the highest noble women can afford it.
Well, and I'm assuming they're basing that on Venetian lace, which is like, very, very, very sought after, right?
Yeah, when everyone listening is designing what freeholders look like, Moorish people, their faction leader be wearing basically Venetian lace.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So yeah, one of my viewers pointed that out to me because she said in the books the lace is talked about a lot.
Oh yeah.
So I said, I don't know, that must have just been that was a decision that she made at the beginning. She made that decision, Michelle did. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure why. I don't know. I'm not sure why. So it would be nice to see lace.
Yeah, so there's going to be a scene, we're talking about the symbolism of there'll be a scene, and not just, suddenly it appears. There'll be a scene of the symbols and explaining why they're like this. And maybe it's just you'll see someone going, let's make a three-headed dragon because there's three major families. It might not have anything to do with the spiral thing or eating its tail, but that was intriguing. We'll explain that. So these are the three big factions. I'm interested in.
And the only reason why, I don't know if Dave and Dan were involved in all that, but because
no, they're not involved in any of the prequels.
No, not the prequels. I'm referring to the original sigil because they said like when the symbols started the symbols are in the very first episode, right? We've got a symbol.
Yeah, I saw your video. I'm not sure if they knew the Targaryen symbol looks like that or if it's a coincidence. I honestly don't know one way or the other. It could be. At first I went no, and I'm like, maybe they did. I honestly, I can't.
Well, because then it was actually Prism that pointed out that the O in Game of Thrones is the circle with the line through it.
And it might turn out they were doing this, or I'm scared we're reading meaning into it.
Yeah, well,
I'm scared.
I'm just saying that because when I saw an interview behind the scenes, Dave and Dan, it was Dave, I think, who said, oh, yeah, these symbols, they're ancient symbols, and this is our way of tying the children of the forest to the White Walkers. And
before I saw that video, I remember I saw it like a year ago. I didn't notice that when they were lining up the bodies, they were in patterns until they pointed that out. Just from the angle or whatever, it just never occurred to me. I didn't even realize they were symbols, much less trying to decode them.
Yeah, well, and so what I did is, I had watched Screen Prism, and they were the ones who had talked about a bunch of the symbols, but how it got brought to my attention is because someone kept asking me about Sansa's pendant, which happened to be shaped like that, and then I'm like, oh, it's the same shape. Okay, that's cool. So, but again, I don't know if that's intentional, because if you look at Michelle Clapton, she wears those same things. She wears those pendants on her own neck. She likes to take circles and then put a chain on them, and then it's a way to kind of like, she wraps it around. So, and then even if you look at some of the maesters, some of their things are kind of like that too. So
some of the things I don't.
So it's kind of like, I worked with this one designer one time, and she liked to go to hardware stores and buy hardware, and then she would then incorporate that into the costumes. So we would be in a fitting, and she would just be like, "Oh, I found this, this really unusual shape, whatever."
Maybe it was just the props master doing that without their permission. I don't know.
Yeah, it could have just been like she had something lying around. Like a lot of designers, what they do is when they go shopping, they'll sometimes just, they'll come across something really unusual and they'll buy a box of them, for instance, and then they'll put it in their stash, and then they'll be like, "Hey, I could use that. I happen to have a bunch of belt buckles that I could use as pendants or something." So, I mean, this is the thing. So a lot of times when I say I'm putting on the tinfoil hat, it could have just easily have not been that, right? It could just easily have been a coincidence.
It's not ridiculous out of hand. I just started going, "Oh, this is I can kind of see that is an Orakesh symbol." So I don't know. I can't stay on the phone for much longer, so I need to wrap up soon.
So
just one thing quickly. So I'm interested in your audience, for all the really creative costume designers and sketch artists there, like these three factions of one, the Freeholders are play around with everything we've always liked about the different locations, from Pentos to Volantis to Mir to Xamatar and Yeti. Then the Young Dragons are these sassy, younger Targaryen versions that have bits military like Robert, but they're bits and pieces of Freeholder mixed in there. And the Sphinxes are the most fascinating, just that they said they're these really intricate costumes that we're going to gradually reveal. They're like a mixture of 24 separate people, bits from here and bits from there that they conquered. Oh, and I forgot to mention that, I talked about the other two POVs. The POV character for the Sphinxes is openly gay.
Okay.
Because they're like ancient Greece, where they don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
That's part of their whole thing about, we need to have diversity in this show, and not just, there's Loras, let's marginalize him, but core cast members who are Asian, black, gay, female political leaders. And I'm going to leave it at that, but I will point out, people are like, you shouldn't be contrasting this with Long Night so much. Why? Long Night is getting overhyped and got an automatic pickup with no story description, whereas these guys really did their homework and put a lot of thought into it. I think we should compare them. They're the two front runners. Mm-hmm. And we haven't, just people hyping it, and it'll be a triumph of diversity. Based on what? That they hired a black person? I mean, 2014, when you heard the casting for season 5 Dorne, were you happy? I was happy. Mm-hmm. On paper, they hired a lot of non-white people to play Dorne. That didn't mean it was good or good diversity. It was not well written. And what are you I see people just going, well, of course we'll see the Summer Isles. Of course we'll see the Summer Isles in Long Night. We don't know where these people come from. They haven't confirmed it. Even though there are black cast members, there aren't any Asian cast members or Hispanic ones.
It's still mostly a white.
And it's just, hey, we got Naomi Watts, and she's a socialite with a dark secret and nothing else.
Yeah.
And again, this is the actual first prequel that was in development, Empire of Ash. They were working on making series Bibles and sketch art and really serious concept art, not just sketches. And Long Night really sounded like the last minute idea HBO went during season 6. During season 7. Hey, let's have the Long Night to cash in on this White Walker fever. When
now, let me ask you,
they don't talk. They're not characters.
Let me ask you another question. So, does it have to be HBO who does Game of Thrones? They can't go to another network. Do they have the rights to everything?
If HBO could have fired David Benioff after the first pilot failed, they would have. Martin sold the rights to Benioff's production company, who in turn sold them to HBO. And it's complicated when it comes to prequels because they technically don't own the prequel rights, or at least they didn't. But I don't know what's going on with Benioff, but he's really... You saw that Confederate thing?
Oh, that is awful.
We're not just going to forget about it. The last Emmys kind of forgot about that when they were just cheering him and stuff. But
just awful.
That was weird, and it's just that 1-2 punch of season 7 was kind of weird, and then this. And I don't think he's going to handle Star Wars well. He's really people are going to wake up that he was just riding Martin's coattails and that he really doesn't know what purely from a production standpoint, not even storytelling, just
you habitually ignore and get insulted by when your production staff tells you things are physically impossible. He doesn't listen.
But that other show that they've pitched, that's been buried. No, is that right? The Confederate one. Has
I heard was vague reports that they didn't drop it. They just shelved it, and he's the kind of guy who doesn't give up on that kind of thing. I don't know. People know more than me.
It's not that he's trying to be awards baiting. He's not trying to be racist. He's trying to tell edgy stuff, and it's you aren't the person to handle edgy stuff. You're bad at it. It's not that
like Westworld. I mean, Westworld have done a very good job of it. I mean, I think they did a really good job on dealing with a lot of different issues. Even they had the Confederado and all that too. I know when I read that story, I was like, I will not be watching that.
Who thought to announce this?
I don't know. I probably won't even watch his Star Wars. I don't even watch those.
Yeah, even they grudgingly admitted maybe we shouldn't have announced it text only, but had something of substance in terms of screenshots or concept art to show people they bought that based on a pitch meeting with no script.
Yeah.
And it's just because they have blind faith in him. And I worry about Long Night because HBO was willing to greenlight Confederate. What do you think they could? And they've done all this crazy stuff in later Game of Thrones seasons, and they want us to get hyped about the prequel that has no basis in Martin's works. And yes, Empire of Ash isn't directly based on something. When they basically the way they put it is, we were painfully self-conscious. We weren't based on Martin's work. It says it's being a series Bible, so we wrote our own book, and the TV show is essentially adapting the series Bible as if it were a book. For those of you at home, if you have a copy of the World Book, I did a count, versus the 2 paragraphs on the Long Night. If you took like the 20 pages on Valyria from the first part of the World Book, and then the 60 pages at the end, which are the lands beyond Westeros, is what it's called. Just beyond Westeros is another 60. There's like 80 pages of source book, not narrative, mind you, just this is what the East is like, of world building and concepts. There's about 80 pages of decent-sized material to round out a world from, plus other details on like the free cities in Valyria from the novels, versus nothing on Long Night. And a lot of Martin in broad stroke, the basic breakdown of the 3 factions.
And you also said that you said Martin also had he had unpublished information as well.
Well, the way it says like notes he had but never published, plus stuff that was in his head that he never wrote down. Yeah. I'm unclear on that, but a lot of it was directly from him, and the way it's structured is going, Martin told us this, not this is our idea. Whenever possible, the series Bible says Martin told us this in a meeting.
So he's at least a consultant on this then.
He's a consultant. He's not working day to day on it, but the Long Night thing where he's trying to distance himself. So
but the woman who
I'm going to do something.
The guy who's behind it, you said he's doing the new. So what's the new movies he's doing again?
The Godzilla movies.
Godzilla, and then who's his partner? What did she do?
There is. I don't know who his partner. What woman?
Oh, sorry. I thought he had a female partner.
He might. I don't know. There's about half a dozen writers, and I know half of them aren't white. I don't know if any of them are women, to be honest.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think this is what will happen. I think time will tell. And I mean, like I said, I don't know if I said this unrecorded, but there's not much time because, come April, we've got the final season. There's only, 6 episodes?
Yeah.
So it's going to be very short. And
there's filming seasons due to weather, so
so by end of May the show will be done, the Game of Thrones show at any rate. So they'll have to, I'm assuming that HBO would announce the prequel during the series, the final series. I'm assuming
to keep the buzz going. My only evidence to point to is that Martin himself on his blogs keeps going, Long Night isn't the only prequel, and it's not as if he's saying, well, the other ones will never be dead. He said the 5th one is dead. 3 others aren't officially dead yet. So I'm saying this is one of those. And I think, given he said one is dead, if this was canceled and the other 3 were shut down, he would say so, and he hasn't.
Yeah.
And there's a ticking clock, right? Because not just HBO, AT&T wants more than one prequel. They said we kind of want 2 to compete with Netflix and Amazon.
Yeah, because we were just saying, I might have said this on camera.
When we were off camera.
That, because unfortunately, if they have one that bombs, they need another.
Yeah.
They'll need another one, right? You don't want to just put all your eggs in one basket.
And particularly something as untried as something that isn't based on any of Martin's writings, which we know nothing about. Versus, I kept scoffing at first when they went, we're going to do Doom of Valyria. I'm like, how do you make a story about that? Everyone blows up. And then when my source was talking, I went, it's like the generation leading up to the Doom that happens at the very end of the show. And it's like Rome, where it's civil wars within Valyria. I keep seeing people go, the budget for that explosion must be horrific. Like, it's not going to be every episode.
But then you get to the end of the series and you're like, oh my God, it all blows up.
That is one other thing I want to point out.
That was going to happen.
A big point, and I do say this when I have a whole video titled, why should we care beyond the Doom? That they emphasize to me, we know people will say, what's the point? Everyone dies. So there's 2 key points. I'm going to end on that. First, the phrase they used was, it's not going to be Lost season 5. Yeah. That having a firm end in place means we're not going to meander off like X-Files season 10. We're going to move fairly quickly, coherently, and succinctly towards an end goal. It's like HBO's Rome, just in a fictional setting. Mm-hmm. Like HBO's Rome couldn't just make crap up in season 8. They're adapting a historical event.
Or like Titanic. We know the ship is going to sink, but it's all
that's a movie. I'm talking about in terms of a TV show. We know it sinks, but what were you saying?
In the movie Titanic, we know the boat is going to sink. But everything that happens before that.
Well, to the people. And more importantly, point 2, they emphasize this a lot. Not everyone dies in the Doom of Valyria. Obviously, you should be invested in the Targaryen. It's a familiar name. It's like Long Night's doing the Starks. This is the rise of the Targaryens and the origin story of House Targaryen. They're the familiar people you get involved with. But beyond the Targaryens, they say a lot of people survive and need to survive for people to be invested, that we will openly promise in season 1 some of these characters will live beyond the Doom who are not Targaryens, but you have to pick which one to have a stake in it. So like the Freeholders are not in Valyria, like the ones from Pentos or Myr. Hey, if there's like some lady who runs the lace industry, the lace cartel, we're hiring mercenaries because we're rich from selling lace in Myr, they could live. So and go on and have lives in the free cities and go on and do other things. So they promised a lot of these characters actually live enough because we know we need the audience to be invested in it.
So we're going to, what I was going to say is I'm going to put your links in the description. This is probably going to be the second video. I'll put your links in the description below. But it's
a whole 8-hour playlist on Empire Bash.
So what's the best way for people to contact you?
My Twitter is @DragonDemands at Twitter. A Dragon Demands, not The Dragon Demands, all one word, because The Dragon Demands was too long, so I shortened it to A, despite my display name. My Hotmail is thedragondemands at hotmail.com.
Oh my God,
and
you still have a Hotmail account?
It's what I know.
Oh my gosh.
It's what I know.
No, I'm not. I'm just teasing you.
And because it's generic, it's like a burner phone to me, basically, right? It's not my real email.
I wish I still had my Hotmail account.
What, you think that I would use a Gmail and use my real name, Guy Incognito? I'm using Hotmail because it's a burner address for my online persona.
No, I get it.
And I can also be found at the wiki itself. Please visit the costume section, which, as I said, is shamefully out of date, but accurate through season 5 and incrementally updated by other people. And we're not going to fade away quietly into the night. The prequel era will come. Everything we lost we'll take back. Everything will be nice again and make up for things like TV Dorn and the Tarleys and all this other stuff.
Yeah, it was funny because my husband was like, you're doing all these Game of Thrones videos. What are you going to do when the show's over?
Oh, no, they know. They need to know the prequel.
And I'm like, there's a prequel. Okay. Like, don't worry.
I was in a pretty dark place, too.
Even after Game of Thrones, I'll probably still do Game of Thrones videos.
Oh, your Blade Runner stuff was nice. I was in a pretty dark place, too, but we're like the example I use is we're like where X-Men and Marvel fandom were in the late 2000s after X-Men 3 and Wolverine Origins failed horribly. Yeah. Wolverine Origins, which I might add, was also written by David Benioff.
Oh, that's a
but remember,
tidbit.
The X-Men movie franchise recovered from that. Marvel movies recovered from that in a different form with the superheroes. Way. So we're at a low point in in a franchise that will last many years, and
I agree.
You have to think we know there's prequels coming by entirely different people.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to rebuilding everything we lost and doing it again the right way. And hey, the next book will come out eventually. And Martin has outlined a lot of prequels for this. We could be doing this for 20 years. Just in different prequel eras, playing around with the Conquest and the Dance of the Dragons.
Now, do you cover any other shows besides Game of Thrones in your show?
When would I find the time?
I don't know. I do Westworld as well, and I do a few other shows. And I've been trying to do more variety, offer more variety. I just, but like I said, once the series is done, I'll probably still continue to do videos. I've been doing videos all year. Even after season 7 is done, I've been doing videos because it takes a long time, right? And as you know, you work 6 months on the Wikia.
So it's a lot of thankless work, and I like to think it meant something to some people. And all of my yelling and frustration and pushing other people was worth it. That we're trying to believe in something. So we got to be better about this. And we were all really frustrated by how the show was going off the rails and yelling about it. We need to fix things. I think public opinion is turning, that people aren't just blindly following this. There is criticism of this, people calling for, why are the same guys in charge after so many mistakes? And it's a franchise. Things will get better under new people.
Yeah.
I'll try to leave it at that. Please check out my content, and I will be hovering around your comments section on YouTube to try and answer any pertinent questions or just react to things that are funny.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad we were able to do this.
I'm amazed that you're writing a book based on all these notes I nerdily put up online. Thank you for making the book. I look forward to it, and we will promote it through the wiki when it comes out.
Well, I'm going to give you a copy, of course.
Oh, don't mail me a copy. I wouldn't know where to begin.
No. Well, it's going to be an ebook to start, and then Patrick and I talked about making it a print book.
Okay,
we're going to do it as an ebook first.
Okay, well, we have a listing of books you can buy that are in the series, so thanks for that, and we'll check it out, and I look forward to seeing when you have all this edited together, minus the heavily redacted parts.
Absolutely.
Okay,
so bye,
long
everybody.
live the Freehold. Bye.
Long live the Freehold.